ட்ரெண்ட் எல்லாம் பார்த்து ஆசைப்படாதீங்க. கொஞ்சம் கொஞ்சமா நீங்க பண்ணுங்க இன்வெஸ்ட். கனவு எல்லாம் நினைவாக்குங்க, இதுதான் பெஸ்ட். ஸ்மார்ட் மற்றும் சிம்பிள் பிலாசபி. ஸ்மார்ட் மக்களுக்கு இதுதான் ஐடென்டிட்டி. டெஸ்ட் பண்ணு நீ, ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணு நீ. சிஸ்டமேட்டிக் இன்வெஸ்ட்மெண்ட் பிளான்ஸ் அண்ணா சொல்றத கேளுங்க. அண்ணா ஸ்மார்ட் ஆகுங்க. ஸ்மார்ட்டா வேலை பண்ணு, SIP ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணு. ஸ்மார்ட்டா வேலை பண்ணு, SIP ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணு. பண்ணணுமா 350cc சவாரி, இல்ல செகண்ட் ஹனிமூன்ல ஆப்பிரிக்கன் சஃபாரி. கட்டணுமா ட்ரீம் ஹோம் இன் டவுன் பேமெண்ட், இல்ல செக்யூர் பண்ணணுமா ராக்கிங் ரிட்டையர்மெண்ட். பிளான் பண்ணணுமா உங்க ஃபாரின் ட்ரிப். நான் செய்ய வேண்டியது ஸ்டார்ட் ஸ்டெப். ஸ்மார்ட்டா வேலை பண்ணு, SIP ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணு. ஸ்மார்ட்டா வேலை பண்ணு, SIP ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணு. ஸ்மார்ட்டா வேலை பண்ணு, SIP ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணு. ஸ்மார்ட்டா வேலை பண்ணு, SIP ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணு.
மியூச்சுவல் ஃபண்ட் முதலீடுகள் சந்தை அபாயங்களுக்கு உட்பட்டவை. முதலீடு செய்யும் முன்பு திட்டம் சார்ந்த ஆவணங்களை கவனமாக படிக்கவும்.
मार्केट्स की लकीर कभी ऊपर कभी नीचे, कभी होना ना फिदा इन ट्रेंड्स के पीछे। छोटी छोटी किस्तों में करो तुम इन्वेस्ट और बड़े बड़े सपने जियो, क्योंकि ये है बेस्ट। स्मार्ट और सिंपल फिलॉसफी, स्मार्ट लोगों की यही है आइडेंटिटी। टेस्ट कर ले तू, स्टार्ट कर ले तू सिस्टमैटिक इन्वेस्टमेंट प्लान्स। भाई सुन मेरी बात, भाई बन जरा स्मार्ट। चल कुछ स्मार्ट कर, SIP स्टार्ट कर। चल कुछ स्मार्ट कर, SIP स्टार्ट कर। करनी हो 350cc की सवारी या सेकंड हनीमून पे अफ्रीकन सफारी। भरना हो ड्रीम होम का डाउन पेमेंट या सिक्योर करना हो एक रॉकिंग रिटायरमेंट। प्लान करना हो अपना फॉरेन ट्रिप। All I need is to start a sip। चल कुछ स्मार्ट कर, SIP स्टार्ट कर। चल कुछ स्मार्ट कर, SIP स्टार्ट कर। चल कुछ स्मार्ट कर, SIP स्टार्ट कर। चल कुछ स्मार्ट कर, SIP स्टार्ट कर।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Hello. Can all of you hear me?
Go ahead, Aarti.
Yeah. So good evening to all of you this Saturday evening, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to this joint webinar hosted by ICICI Prudential Mutual Fund and the Hindu Business Line. I'm very happy to see so many registrations for a webinar on asset allocation in volatile times. And the very fact that you've registered for this webinar shows that you're a smart investor, because today when I look at the market, the kind of webinars that attract thousands of participants are those on options trading or small cap multi-baggers. So the fact that you've registered for this tells us that you do know about the importance of asset allocation. So the first presentation in this webinar will be from Mr. Jeevan Koshitharian, who's a very senior person from ICICI Mutual Fund. He is the regional head of the Tamil Nadu business for ICICI Pru Mutual Fund. He has a 16-year stint in the BFSI industry, which means he's seen more than 2 market cycles. In fact, many fund managers have not spent this long. He has worked with brands like ICICI Bank, FedEx, Nippon EMC, etc. in his previous stints. Over the next 20 to 25 minutes, he will be taking you to a presentation that lays the grounding for asset allocation. Basically, he'll talk about the need for asset allocation and what are the basic approaches that you can take to it, and what are the kind of pitfalls that asset allocation actually saves you from. Once he is done, I will be starting my webinar and I will be taking you to how to actually go about doing asset allocation, what works and what doesn't. So I hope you find this an enjoyable seminar. Let me hand over to Mr. Koshi now.
Thank you. Thank you, Aarti. I hope my voice is audible and clear.
Yes.
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining in. And this is a wonderful evening. I'm sure most of you will be very, very excited to know more about asset allocation. I remember my journey of investing. In fact, spending 16 years in the financial industry, I would have started investing personally over the last 9.5, 10 years. And over my last 8-9 years of personal investment journey, over the last 1 year, there has been a pondering thought over me that, what is exactly am I doing? Is it the right thing when we do? And I think over the last 1 year, I personally have believed on the asset allocation and shifted my entire portfolio based on the pure asset allocation rule. So I think this is the learning which I had. And when this topic came, I thought, what best to share my personal view to start this. Asset allocation seems very easy, and the word itself is very easy, but I can tell you for sure, it's very difficult to practice and it is completely difficult to execute. That's the most toughest part of it. So to start with, I would spend a few minutes on giving a background. If there are few investors who are there who is coming for the first time, I think one of the best investment options in the current scenario is mutual funds. As we all know, mutual funds are pooling of money where we have the savings of number of investors which are commonly managed with the financial goal. They have a lot of advantages in mutual fund, be it diversification in terms of risk, both in terms of commodity risk and both in terms of the stock risk. So mutual funds have become common today. I think before earlier, we had to explain what mutual funds are a lot about. I would thank the regulator and the AMFI Association for bringing in a lot of initiative. Today, people are talking about mutual fund Sahi Hai. So I think that's the tagline which is there. And investors who have yet not started mutual fund, my only request, you need to have a basket of mutual fund, which adds to the return part of it, which adds to be the wealthier part of it. Mutual funds is basically an investor's money managed by a mutual fund AMC. They invest their money in a scheme. There are different varieties of schemes which are available, ranging from equity, debt, and hybrid. And there is a fund manager who puts his expertise in terms of knowing which company to select or which issuer to select when it comes down to debt, which companies to select. Based on the expertise and the objective of the fund, the securities are invested And as per the scheme's objective, there are a variety of schemes. There are around 14,000 schemes which are available in the Indian mutual fund market. So every scheme has a unique objective. Based on that, the potential returns are generated for the investor, and the returns are giving it back to the investor. So I think it's a win-win, more than win or lose situation. It's a win-win situation for the investor when it comes down to the investment. I need not have to talk much about the investment avenues. This makes me remember my childhood. In fact, I remember my dad, taught me something when he started his investment. The first thing that he did was to buy a land, and then he constructed a house. And over the period of time, we know how to manage, real estate. I did not have to tell anybody, or, I'm sure most of us is born and brought up knowing these two asset classes, which is nothing but real estate and gold. In fact, my wife or my mother would be the best person to tell me when to buy gold and when to sell gold. So I think real estate and gold is something which is there in our blood. As Indians, we are all savers compared to the rest of the world. We are all savers. In fact, we save approximately 57% of our money that we earn. So in fact, that is something which is very, very good about India. But when it comes down to the avenues of savings, predominant avenue of savings are there in real estate, gold, and fixed income. Equity has been there in the flavor. In fact, I was reading one of the reports which is telling that in the last 6 months, I personally, and I think most of you would have saved a little bit amount of your money, which used to go to the credit card payments, which used to be going your miscellaneous expenses. And because of the lockdown, and because we have not had much expenses when it comes down to shopping or entertainment or any other aspect, most of you would have saved a little bit amount of money based on their earning capacity. And it was very evident that, one of the most, acceptable classes of investment, which most of us or most of the investors have found, was equity. So we've seen a good amount of, demat account getting opened in the few months. In fact, in the last 6 months, the kind of accounts which are opened across has been phenomenal. So as we all know, there are different avenues of investment and different asset classes which are there. So broadly, we have equity, real estate, gold, and fixed income. I always tell a small example. When we're in school, we always remember the y-axis and the x-axis. So if you draw a line between the risk versus the return, I'm sure you'll be able to put everything at an angle, starting from fixed income being a very safe, where you take a little risk and you make a slightly better return compared to your gold, which gives a little bit better return potential comparatively at certain years. And real estate, yes, I need not have to tell, but my only personal advice to all of you is that when you are doing a real estate investment, please take into consideration the amount that you want to spend and what is the actual return. In fact, the rest all, we know what is the gold price which is there on a daily basis. We know what is the fixed deposit rates that the banks are giving. We know what the share market prices are. But this asset class, which is known as real estate, it is very difficult to ascertain the actual value, because as of now, there is nothing which tells that a square piece of land, which is maybe a square feet of land in Chennai or in Mumbai or even in Delhi, what is the, I know government have come out with the fair valuation, but what is the exact value? So we always try to, most of us would have a lot of affinity toward real estate and see that, real estate definitely gives double, triple, 4 times kind of a return. But I think whatever be the avenue of investment, it is very, very important to ascertain what is the potential of return that you can get. So I think fixed deposit, I need not have to explain you. Gold, you have seen years where the gold was slightly low and, flat. There are years where gold has given, multi-bagger kind of a return. Even the last 1 year, gold has been a multi-bagger return. There has been real estate where it has been flat for a very long period. Yes, all these asset classes go through cycle. And the same is with equity. So I think with the current avenue of investment, if you plot a graph, probably the equity would be there on the higher side when it comes down to return potential. So I think as an informed or a smart investor, we need to have investments across all, and that is very, very important when it comes down to the investments. Moving on, I think just to give you a little bit of importance on what equities bring to the investor's portfolio, because today we cannot and we should not, forget this asset class. It would be very difficult for a lot of investors to gain that wealth unless you invest into equities. There's a very, very small example that I quote. I tell that, all of us are working, maybe salaried, maybe business, and all of us are earning money. That's something which is very, very important. But my only first question, which I ask each of you, is that whether your money or your hard-earned money that you earn by working from 9 to 8 or 9 to 5, whether they give a return or whether they work for you, whether the money that you earn is working for you in return. That's very, very important. Or, when I tell this in my in the classes, I told that, whether it is not M-A-N-I, money, it is M-O-N-E-Y, whether the money that you are making is working for you. How can it happen? And I think equities are a very, very classical way of making your money work for you. It's very simple. You need to do ideally a very, very good investment when it comes down to, just to give a small example. When you buy a company share, I'm sure you're not going to work for that particular company, or you want to go and visit there and ensure that their profits are going up or ensure that their productivity is going up. What it in turn means is that when you're investing in a particular share, the return of that comes to you in forms of. So what is the importance of investment and equities gives you is that you're being part of that business, which is a very, very important actor. So long-term wealth creation, equities have the best advantage when it comes down to the long-term wealth creation. Annual income in forms of dividends, which is now made taxable. You become an owner in a company, which is very, very important. A lot of you would have focus and thought process that the partners you will become a partner in the company. So that is something which is very, very important when it comes down to the investment in terms of the equity. Similarly, this is a very, very classical graph which is there across all the, you would have seen markets going up, coming down. If I plotted the graph, this has been, there is a lot of events, and we have come across one of the major events even recently also. There has been a lot of events which has in fact happened in markets, which has been challenging for the markets, which has been growing for the market. So equity investments are born to have the risk of ups and downs. But if you have a longer journey, the wealth creation journey is more than happy, which comes in the form of, which is the most important aspect is about the wealth creation. So I think equities does that job of giving you that multi-bagger return. Only one aspect, which is very, very important, is on the long-term side. Coming into the next important asset class, which is about the fixed income. I'm sure most of you have experienced fixed income in form of FDs, in form of FDs and from the banks. But in the mutual fund space, there are fixed income products which are available. I think what is the advantage of fixed income products is a lower volatility as compared to equity. If I draw the graph, it would be slightly lower when it comes down to the exposure in terms of risk. The return potential also is minimal. It is a advantage of debt is basically you get a regular cash flow. Somebody who's looking for a regular cash flow, debt or fixed income products comes as an advantage. There's a flexibility of investment horizon starting from even a single day to maybe 1 year, 3 year on a horizon of investment. So looking into the second asset class, I think this has been better. And coming into the main topic, which is asset allocation, I think asset allocation gives a long advantage when it comes down to, I'll give you a view of why is it so. Most of you does understand what cricketing is all about. And I think it's an IPL season, and most of the young investors would be following. I need not have to explain. The perfect match is only won if you had sixes and fours and also have a defensive picking of singles. You cannot win the match only by being very defensive. You cannot win a match without having sixes and fours. So asset allocation is just like a winning strategy in cricket match. You need to have that sixes and fours in your portfolio, and also you need to have that defensive singles when the markets are volatile. And that is all about asset allocation. Asset allocation is a combination of sixes and fours and a singles, which is what is known as the winning strategy. And this is the most important aspect, because as human beings, we are all, we all go through a phase where there is a lot of challenges that comes in front of us. The moment, because we are driven by sentiments, and when markets are falling, I'm sure most of you would want to come out of market, because that is a fear which is created in the minds of individuals. And we are, the moment we have a fear, the first thing is to go to safety. Supposing if you're there in a building where there's an earthquake, the moment you do is to run out of the building and go to safety. And that happens even in the equity investments. In fact, that is where we have the asset allocation, which plays a very, very important aspect. So there are basically three different kinds of, as I told you, you can make money in equity, you can make money in debt, you can make money investing into gold. Asset allocation is a single investment which takes into consideration the equity part of it, which gives you that income, the debt part of it, which gives you regular cash flow, as well as buy some gold, which one needs. So that is something which is very, very important. There is something known as a dynamic asset allocation, which I'm sure Aarti would be covering in detail. But this is something which is of the current environment. I think there cannot be a static asset allocation. Why a static asset allocation is not of importance is because as time is changing, as we grow older, or as that is one side of it. But even in markets also, I will show you a snapshot which will give you an understanding that, it is not necessary that only equities can generate that return, or it is not necessary that only debt can give you that return. It has to be a combination, and you cannot always have a static asset allocation. You need to keep changing, and it should change according to your risk. It should also change according to the market condition, and that is very, very important. The dynamic asset allocation is a category which changes not only based on your age, but also changes based on the market condition. So this is something which is very important. Why asset allocation? I think if we have to manage cyclicality in the asset classes, what is that cyclicality in the asset classes? I will now want to show you a example here. Now, if you see, this is a graph which has been plotted from 2006. I can plot from 1990 also, but if I plot, it will not be visible. So I've taken the last 15 years of data in this. The first column shows what has been the return of equities in that year. The second column shows what has been the return of fixed income, or maybe in short form of short-term bond funds. And third, what has been the return of gold in that particular year. If you draw, I'm sure it is very difficult to draw a algorithm or if you did the year where the equities didn't do well, whether the debt markets did well, or whether the gold did well. So I think it is very difficult to draw a difference between the or you can draw a sequence when it comes down to the returns aspect. You can definitely refer this graph, which shows that there was a year 2012 or maybe 2011 where equity markets gave 24% negative return. On the same year, we had gold which gave 10%, we have debt which gave around 8% return. Now, this is a very, very important aspect which you need to understand. And that is where I told you the asset allocation or the dynamic asset allocation plays a very, very important role on moving out from the equity and coming into debt. It's very easy to say, but I think if you don't have something which is fundamentally driven, it is difficult to execute. And as I told you in the beginning, asset allocation is not only just allocating money in equity and debt. You need to have a rebalancing which happens on a regular basis, and a rebalancing cannot be done from the investor point of view, because it has got taxation, it has got the timing, because we are all driven by sentiments, and the human behavior is such that it does the opposite of what we think. So coming back to my previous example, I think most of you will agree to this, and this is one of the most important aspect of this entire presentation, the importance of asset allocation. This graph shows you that 92% of the time, the reason of creating wealth is only because of asset allocation. It is not because that you have selected the right stock. It cannot be generated by timing the market, not at all. Most of you will say that, if I have bought at the bottom of the markets, I would have been the most smarter investor. It never happens so. It is for not because of this security selection. Some of you will say that, I have bought the right security which is there, and, I'm sure this security will give me the, wealth creation. It is not that. So what is of utmost importance is asset allocation. Because as I showed you in the previous example, there are years where equity give you negative return, and there are years where at that point of time, the debt gives you the positive return. So it is very, very important that if you do the asset allocation, there is 92% chance that you make a beautiful return over the long run. And that is the importance of asset allocation vis-a-vis a normal equity fund or normal debt fund. And this was spoken, this is based on this research which has happened across the world. And I think this is a very, very strong point. The reason for wealth creation is not equity or not the selection of a particular stock. It is only and only because of the asset allocation. So going slightly further, I think I wanted to just showcase the investor cycle, usually what happens. And this is what is the traditional fixed income. Yes, most of you will definitely agree that this is how it grows. It grows very, very steadily. There is not much of a fluctuation which happens when it comes down to the investment cycle. But actually what happens when you invest in equity market linked or equity product is this: you get a different experience. Market goes up, you are happy. Market comes down, you are unhappy. And I have plotted down some of the investor needs of money. Actually, you will have needed at the bottom of the markets, you would have made some money. But what actually you would have done, you would have redeemed the money at somewhere before the markets would have fallen out. That is because the sentiments at that point of time, and this we have very, very evidently seen, in 2008-9, when the markets were bottom, I think everybody redeemed money and nobody had invested the money. This is how the typical investor cycle happens in the market. And I will just now again show you something which is also of interesting aspect. Investors have access to these money. At the peak of the market, I'm sure in 2017 or maybe 2006-7, most of you would have invested the money. It is all because it is all driven by sentiments. Sentiments are always carrying through the market. It goes up, it comes down. I think that is something which is of utmost importance. What is the asset allocation journey does to you? Your expectation of return is always above the FD. I'm sure most of you will talk whenever there is a financial planner who approaches and he talks about the fixed income or maybe the mutual fund investment. You will always ask, yes, why should I invest in a mutual fund? And your expectation would be always better than the traditional investment product. But look at the journey of equity markets. It is slightly ups and down. And I will show you what would be the journey of an asset allocation fund. And that is the importance of this. The journey of your investment in an asset allocation fund or in an asset allocated product will always be smoother. You will not have that jerks or that falls in the market. See, the same journey which an equity fund would have happened will bring a lot of tensions in your mind, will bring a lot of thought process. So here is an example of what would have been the growth of an asset allocation product. Yes, it also comes down, but to a very large extent, it is near to the expectation that you have in terms of the return. I'm sure most of you will be very, very happy when you get a 2 to 3% above the current fixed rate deposit. And I think that is what asset allocation does to your portfolio. It gives you that growth and it protects to the volatility when it comes down to the market. It's a very, very beautiful saying. The dynamic asset allocation rebalancing strategy is something which is of utmost important. When the equity valuation goes up, we tell when the markets gets very, very costlier, we need to reduce equity. And that is the objective of the asset allocation products, which are dynamically managed. That means if market goes up, which is equity valuation is going up, they reduce the equity exposure automatically. Classical example, 2007, 2018, when the markets were all high in terms of value, they brought down the equity exposure. The moment markets come down, I will just give a classical example. The recent fall of the market, which was in March of 2020, the equity exposure in the asset allocation products were all increased. And because the equity valuation came down, there were negative sentiments in the market. And that is the time, because when it comes down to sentiments, we would not have done that. But if you look into the fundamentals, you would have definitely bought more equity in March 2020. And we have seen how the markets have given return in the last 6 months. So I think the key for the dynamic asset allocation is the rebalancing, which happens automatically. And I think investing in a dynamic asset allocation gives you a rebalancing effort. You know, rebalancing is very, very important because we need to buy at low and sell it high. It's very simple to say that we need to buy at low and sell it high. It's very difficult to execute because we are driven by sentiments, and asset allocation funds are not driven by sentiments, but on fundamentals. And I would know Aarti would be definitely covering in detail on what are the basic strategies that is being followed in a dynamic asset allocation fund. So an effective portfolio is nothing but it's a balance of assets. You need to have that equity, you need to have that debt, and it needs to be managed dynamically to have you an optimal portfolio allocation. So this is what I wanted to basically cover. And before ending my presentation, I think for all your goals, which is even short term or long term, please look into asset allocation. Please look into mutual funds as an avenue. Most of you will think, can I use mutual funds as the emergency money? Yes. Can I use mutual funds for planning my holiday? Yes. You can definitely use mutual funds to buy your car also. I think there is a huge focus which is going in terms of whether you should take an EMI or you should do an SIP. I personally believe that EMI is something which kills you mentally as well as financially. On the other side, SIP is something which gives you a financial freedom as well as a mental peace. I think focus on that. A lot of difference would come up in our wealth creation journey. I'm sure long-term requirements, retirement, tax planning, house equity, everything can be done in mutual funds. So mutual funds definitely gives you an option for giving you the advantage in terms of wealth creation. So that is from my side. And I hope I have kept my presentation in time on the allocated time which was there. So Aarti, over to you for the next half of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Koshi. That was an extremely clear presentation on the benefits of asset allocation, particularly the statistics that you presented about as much as 90% of a person's returns actually coming out of asset allocation and not from security selection and other things, right? So let me go ahead and take this forward with my presentation. Yeah, I hope this is clear. So what are the questions that most investors ask us today? In Business Line, we often take queries from investors who write in to us, readers, and many of these are actually investors who've been in the market for a while. So what are the questions we are getting today, if you want to see? So the one top of mind question is, small cap funds have delivered very big gains. Plus now there's a SEBI rule saying that all mutual funds, multi-cap mutual funds should invest more in small caps. So which one should I buy? That is one question. Of course, people are very unhappy with some debt funds and they say, should we sell the debt funds and buy gold ETFs instead? Because gold has given a 50% return in the last 1 year. So after seeing some of the listing gains on IPOs, people ask, should I put 10 lakh in this IPO? See, when I put 1 lakh, I don't make enough gains, right? Then people say, FDs are so disappointing, they're giving us just 5%. So should I move it into stock SIPs, right? And international investing is a big fad today. So many investors ask, should I start an SIP in Amazon or in Facebook or in, so these are the kind of questions that we get. But to me, they all show that the investor asking this question is not aware of the importance of asset allocation, right? Because investment is not a either or choice. It is not about whether you should invest in small cap funds or whether you should invest in gold. It is about how much you allocate to each asset, right? So before I get to the more state topic of asset allocation, let me tell you the story of Mr. Subramaniam, who was actually, this is a fictitious story, but it's actually based on a real life relative of mine. So he retired in November 1999 and got 40 lakh rupees. 40 lakh was quite a big sum at that time, equal to about 1.5 crores today actually. So he saw at that time that the most attractive investment were these equity funds in the market. So there were a lot of funds, equity funds and balance funds, which were giving a return of close to 100% in 1999. So what he did was he immediately put a lot of his money, 40 lakh, into these equity MFs, right? The top performing ones. Very unfortunate timing, because in 2000, the market crashed by 50%. Many of these funds went down even more, and he lost half his retirement benefits in this, and he was left with 20 lakh. He was completely annoyed with mutual funds then, especially equity funds. And people told him that, why are you even going for equities when investments in government securities can give you great returns? So he switched to gilt funds, which were giving 16% at that time, right? So he was quite happy for a year and got to 23 lakh rupees. The Sensex, meanwhile, what it did was between 2002 and 2004, there was a fairly strong rally in the Sensex. And he got this FOMO feeling, am I missing out on something big? And he switched his entire money, which was now 29 lakh, into equity funds in 2004. May 2004, after an election result, the market was very disappointed and it beat down the Sensex by 18%. That made him very jittery because he had experienced the fall in the equity markets once. So he switched half of his money again to bank FDs, and again he was back to 24 lakh. Now you can see how from 40 lakh to 24 lakh he has come in a matter of 5 years, right? So again, from 2004 to 2007, there was this big bull market, one of the biggest bull markets we've seen in the Indian market. So he again switched, the MF investment grew very fast. It became 48 lakh. So he decided, why do I have any money in bank FDs? Let me go back to equities, right? Unfortunate person that he is, again, the GFC meltdown caught him unawares and he was back to 30 lakh. That was when he said, I'm done with these mutual funds and I'm done with equities. And he quit for good from the markets in December 2009 and switched his entire portfolio to bank FDs and gold. So what has happened to Mr. Subramaniam? He started with retirement benefits of 40 lakh, which became 54 lakh after 10 years, right? Over his 10-year journey, had he simply put all his money in bank FDs, he would have made 7%. Had he put his money in equities, he would have made 18.6%. This is based on Sensex returns and SBI returns. But because he kept switching from one thing to another based on the mood of the market and the mood of the public, he made only 3%, right? So I think this story really tells you why asset allocation is important. It is basically to avoid all these emotional roller coasters that you go through when you try to switch from one investment to another, right? So what I've done is I've sort of done a working of Mr. Subramaniam had he done the asset allocation of very simple asset allocation of 50% in bank FDs and 50% in Sensex just after he retired, right? Here AA is not Alcoholics Anonymous, it is asset allocation, okay? So had he put 20%, 20 lakhs in bank FDs and 20 lakhs in the Sensex, he would have started with a portfolio value of 40 lakh. Now I've taken historical interest rates of SBI from RBI, and I've taken actual Sensex values and worked out how his portfolio would have moved each year, right? So you can see at the end of this period, all he did was at the beginning, he split his money and thereafter he didn't do anything. He just went to sleep, right? After 10 years, his portfolio value had grown to 110 lakh rupees, right? It is was not a very high CAGR, but it was far better than the 3% that he managed. He actually got a 10.6% CAGR. So in this, I'm assuming that Mr. Subramanian didn't do any rebalancing. So he just kept 20 lakh in each asset and he just let it run. If the asset goes up or down, he didn't bother about it, right? Now there is this other example, had he done annual rebalancing. Now what is rebalancing? Initially, you decide that I would like only 50-50 in safe assets and risky assets. Thereafter, every year, at the end of the year, you take stock of your portfolio. You again split it half and half between the two assets. If any asset has run up, say equities has run up a lot, you actually sell a bit of equity and put that back into bank FDs. Or if bank FDs are outperforming the equity part, which can happen sometimes, then you take money out of bank FDs and put them into equities. So you do the opposite of what you would do if you were driven by emotion. So whatever is performing, you take money out of it and put it into the underperforming asset. So had Mr. Subramaniam actually done this annual rebalancing, you can see how his portfolio would have done even better, right, than the other option. So from 40 lakh to 131 lakh, he would have gone at a decent 12.5% CAGR. Now you may tell me 12.4% is not such a great return, but it is for a 50-50 portfolio. And also remember, during this period, there were two big market crashes that he has lived through, right? I hope Mr. Subramanian's story is a cautionary tale for everybody who thinks that asset allocation is not necessary and they can simply guess at the best performing asset in any particular year and invest in it, right? So now that we've established that there is a need for asset allocation, how do you go about it? How do you decide what should be your equity proportion and your debt proportion, right? So here I've seen many people peddle this simple rule saying you do 100 minus your age and then you can arrive at your equity exposure. So they say that if you do 100, suppose I am 40 years old, 100 minus 40, 60% is what I should put in equities, 40% is what I should put in debt. But honestly, if you look at asset allocation, it is a very personal decision and actually you cannot go by such thumb rules. Now, I and Mr. Rakesh Junjunwala cannot have the same asset allocation because he's already made his wealth. I'm yet to make my wealth, so I would like a higher equity proportion. Maybe he would like to more capital preservation, right? So here are some examples of why asset allocation is a very personal decision. So suppose a 20-year-old has just bagged a high-paying job in a startup, but it's also high risk. He can lose the job at any time. We know how startups are. So his savings are only 5 lakhs. So because he's 20-year-old, can he put 80% in equities? I think not, because he needs an emergency fund before he even starts on equities. So the first investment he makes must probably be in bank FDs, so that if he loses his job, he will have something to tide over that period. If a mid-30s couple want to enroll their daughter in engineering within 3 years, equity will be a very unsuitable choice for them. So they shouldn't do 100 minus age and put 70% in equities. Similarly, an early retiree who's 40, he's decided to throw in the towel early. If he needs regular income, then portfolio full of stocks will be too volatile for him. So he may not prefer a 60% allocation to equities, right? So these examples just show why asset allocation is not a formulaic thing. It is a very, very personal decision, which is based on many factors. So what are those factors? First thing is your age. So broadly, the younger you are, the more is your risk appetite and the higher you can afford to put in equities. Why do we say this? Because we have seen in India that equity markets go through cycles which typically last 6 to 7 years. So by the time the market goes down and comes up again, the 7-year period has passed. So if you invest in equities for less than 7 years, what typically happens is when you need your money back, you may have to pull out at a lower value and you have capital loss. So people get disappointed, right? So the best thing is to have a 10-year plus window for your equity investments. To do that, you must be a young investor, right? A second thing that matters is your life stage. Suppose you have a lot of dependents. Suppose you're just a family, you're a single person, you've not married, you can afford to have a more risky portfolio with a higher equity weight. If you have more dependents, a lot of people rely on you for their emergency expenses, for their medical expenses, etc., then you cannot afford to have volatility in your portfolio and you should have a lower equity weight. Similarly, your goals also matter. When you have short-term goals, fixed income is good. When you have long-term goals, equity can fit in, right? The more you have EMIs, the less you can afford to put your money in equities and watch your portfolio going up and down every year with your heart in your mouth. Finally, your net worth. I've often seen during my career how very rich investors, they don't actually want too much equity because they've already made a lot of money and they're very, very keen to preserve it, right? So they are looking at capital protection products. But young people who are just starting out, who are yet to build their wealth, they do have to have equity so that in the long run, they can get rich and wealthy. So what are the various approaches to asset allocation? I've thought of 4 or 5 approaches. So the first thing is a risk-based asset allocation. So one of the people watching this also asked me, how much does a risk appetite actually decide on the asset allocation? Actually, it does to a large extent. But the problem comes when you ask people to define their risk, right? So when everything is going very well in the market, small caps are giving you threefold returns in 6 months, etc. If you ask somebody, what is your risk appetite? They say, oh, I am a very aggressive investor. Please recommend small cap funds to me, right? But when the market falls 10% or even 15%, as we saw a few months ago in March, then people suddenly realize that they've been overestimating their risk appetite, right? So to assess risk appetite, the one simple rule that I use when people ask questions is this, right? You assume that you will lose 50% of your money that you put in the equity portion. Can you take that loss or not, right? So based on how much of loss the person can take, you can backward the proportion of equity allocation in your portfolio. So suppose you have 30 lakh to invest, a 25% equity allocation will mean you can, if the market tanks by 50%, worst case scenario I know, but I know the market has also tanked 50% in some cases like 2008. So let's be prepared for the worst. So with a 25% equity allocation, you can mean losing 3.25 lakh. So you may be comfortable with it. Out of 30 lakh, you will lose 3.25 lakh. So I may decide, okay, let me have 25% equity allocation. With a 50% equity allocation, you can lose 7.5 lakh if the market tanks 50%, right? Will you be comfortable with it? Will it give you sleepless nights? That can decide your asset allocation. Now, if you really think of yourself as a very risk-seeking and aggressive investor, this is the test you have to put yourself through. If you invest 30 lakh and you lose 10.5 lakh, will you still be okay with it? Will you be able to sleep easy? If you can, then you are really a risk-seeking investor and you can afford a 70% equity allocation, right? The second kind of approach to asset allocation is actually goal-based allocation, which is also, which makes use of the concept of mental modeling. Okay, so what do you do in this? You actually map out all your personal and family goals. For us Indians, we are not about I, me, myself. So all our goals and financial goals are actually meshed with what our families want, right? So you map them out. For each goal, you try and assign a timeline. So if your daughter is 15 years old and in 3 years' time you want her to join college, that goal, the timeline will be 3 years. Suppose I'm worried about losing my job at any time. The timeline, that goal will require an emergency fund, and the timeline for that goal will be within 6 months, right? Now, suppose I want to take a vacation in 5 years' time, or I want to upgrade my car, then the timeline for that will be 5 years. So you do this for each goal, and then you create separate portfolios towards each of these goals. So how does this help? This helps because for each portfolio, you can adopt a different asset allocation. So for goals that are less than 3 years, less than 3 to 5 years, you can afford to go with liquid funds, short-term funds, corporate bond funds. For goals which are 5 to 7 years, you can have a balanced kind of an asset allocation with a bit of fixed income and a bit of equity, so or hybrid funds, etc. For goals that are more than 7 years, you can go for large cap equity funds, index funds, etc. And for goals that are 10 years plus, you can have a mid and small cap allocation within your equity portfolio, and you can have a very small debt allocation, right? You can also use vehicles like PPF, NPS, etc. in this, right? So how this helps is, once you create these baskets towards different goals, you will not be tempted to pull out the money whenever there's something happening in the market. Once you know you're saving this money for your daughter's education or for your own family vacation, you will not be tempted to pull it out simply for frivolous expenses, right? So that is how this approach works. There is a third approach, which is a far more simpler approach. So you say that I don't have specific goals in mind right now, either I'm very young or I've fulfilled all my responsibilities. So my only goal actually is wealth creation. So what do I do? If your goal is open-ended like that and it is simply to create wealth, then you can decide on a steady state asset allocation, which is a fixed proportion of risky assets and non-risky assets in your portfolio, and just stick to it, right? Every year you do some rebalancing, which helps you get from one asset to another, right? So based on your risk appetite, as I told you how to assess at the first point, you assess your risk appetite, choose an overall asset allocation and just stick to it. Rebalancing is very important. As I showed you in the story of Mr. Subramaniam, when you rebalance your assets, the results that you finally get are far better than not rebalancing, because when assets are performing well, you will be pulling out money from it, and when assets are not performing well, you will be topping up that asset. So it will add to your performance in the long run, right? So you have to review this kind of fixed allocation based on your life stage. As your life stage changes, your dependents, liabilities, etc., will change. Your risk appetite also may change. So it would be good to actually review it, right? Now we come to dynamic asset allocation. Dynamic is where, based on how you think different assets will perform, you change the allocation of your portfolio. Now, as I showed you before with Mr. Subramaniam, this is a tricky thing to do. So it is better to use a formula or a system or a model to do dynamic asset allocation. Mutual funds in India do dynamic asset allocation, and they use many models for this, right? So what are some of the models is what I wanted to take you through quickly. So the first thing is they use Nifty PE ratio. So the Nifty publishes a PE ratio daily on its website. So if Nifty PE ratio is up to 16 times, the equity weight, the amount of equity you have in your portfolio should be more than 70%. This is used by some mutual funds, so I'm just putting it out here. You can use slightly different weights also, but the broad PE levels are useful to know. So between 16 and 20 times, it is 50 to 70% equity. Between 20 24, it comes down to 30 to 50. So what this broadly shows you is the market is super expensive when the Nifty PE ratio is 24 and above, and therefore you're having a low equity weight of 10 to 30% here. But there are disadvantages to using this model. The first one is that the Nifty PE ratio itself is not calculated well, because it used the standalone earnings of the companies rather than the consolidated earnings, which ought to be used. When the market is coming off a recession or a low earnings growth period, the PE can look artificially high. Suddenly, when the profits rebound, then the Nifty starts to look reasonable overnight. So this is one disadvantage of this kind of method, right? Now, if you believe that the Nifty 50 is not really representative of your portfolio or of the market, you can use the Nifty 500 PE ratio. This is a more broader market index. Here, the model that I've seen funds use is up to 16 times you have more than 2/3 of your portfolio in equity. 16 to 20 times you reduce it. 20 to 24 you reduce it below half. Again, beyond 28 times, if the Nifty 500 PE shoots up, then you have better get to a very low equity weight, right? Here again, the disadvantages are the same. The calculation of the PE ratio can include many non-quality companies also, because in Nifty 500, not all stocks will pass quality filters, float filters, liquidity filters, etc. So this is the problem. Again, when you come off a low earnings base, it can be misleading, right? The third thing is the Buffett indicator, which is often cited by fund managers, which is the market cap to GDP ratio. So this takes the market cap of the entire market, all the listed stocks, and compares it to the country's GDP for a year, right? So typically when the market cap to GDP is 100%, it shows that the market is fairly or fully valued, right? So that is when the equity proportion goes below 50%. So when the market cap to GDP is less than 50%, it's a very attractively valued market, and more than 90% you can have in equities, right? But I found that this indicator in practice is more applicable to US stocks, because it's a developed market and almost the entire economy is reflected in the listed universe. But in India, the listed universe is a small fraction of the GDP. So sometimes you may get very misleading numbers when you compare the market cap to GDP. In fact, you can constantly say it is undervalued by comparing the market cap to GDP, right? Even when the market is actually peaking out. A final thing is Nifty price to book value. Price to book value actually is a ratio which values the assets on the balance sheets of companies. So when the price to book value is up to 2, you can have a more than 80% allocation. It shows that companies in the market are trading fairly close to the true value of their assets, right? When the price to book value climbs above 5, then the equity weight needs to come down. Actually, this method works better when it is combined with the PE ratio, because both are slightly complementary to each other. What are the shortcomings? Price to book is not an appropriate measure for all sectors. It is for services, for example, where companies don't have huge assets, it may not be a very great indicator, right? The other slightly complicated method I've seen is this yield gap method, where you compare the 10-year G-Sec yield to the Nifty earnings yield. What is a Nifty earnings yield? Nifty earnings yield is just E by P. If you invert the P ratio, it becomes the Nifty earnings yield. So the lower this ratio is, the more the equity market is attractively valued. Now, what is the logic of this? The logic of this is that if the interest rates in the economy are lower, obviously fixed income is not attractive and equity becomes more attractive. Similarly, if interest rates in the economy are lower, the cost of capital for companies is low, and therefore companies can make higher equity returns, right? So that is the logic. But yield gap can be high or low for a very long period. So sometimes this model can trip you up. Many funds recently have started using momentum indicators. So they use technical analysis and they actually increase your equity weight if they feel the market is trending up, and they decrease it if the market is falling. I'm not a great devotee of this method because it is a very momentum based thing, which will actually help you take on more risk when things are getting very dicey in the market, and you will be reducing risk when actually you should be buying from a fundamental perspective. So overall, combining many of these approaches together can lead you to a good asset allocation pattern. Most dynamic allocation funds in the market initially started out with a single indicator approach, Nifty PE or price to book or market cap, and slowly they have moved to a multiple indicator approach that uses all of these indicators, right? So what should you not do in volatile times? You should not make abrupt switches in your long run asset allocation. So just because small cap stocks have gone up in the last 6 months, and you found that your portfolio is not keeping up, don't switch a substantial portion of your allocation to small caps. Resist that temptation. Okay. Do not raise weights in assets with good recent performance. So the problem we see with most retail investors is they look at the last 1 year, 2 year return, and whatever is doing well, they are very tempted to put their money there. This leads them into pitfall because the next 1 or 2 years can be very bad for that asset, whether it is gilt funds, whether it is gold or equities, right? Don't do this. Don't copy the allocation of your relatives, neighbors, or some great asset manager that you admire, because their financial situation and their life situation will be very different from yours. And as I told you, asset allocation is a very personal decision that you need to take. Don't experiment with new assets that you've never seen before. Today, I see a fad for international stocks, but given that even tracking Indian stocks and analyzing them is so difficult, how do you value and how do you actually understand the business of stocks that are listed overseas? So be cautious on that. Finally, don't ignore risks because they are overshadowed by the returns for the moment, because the risks will manifest at some point in time, right? Finally, one thing that I like to look for while deciding on my asset allocation is the behavioral indicators in the market. When I see investors on Twitter or in the social media getting very excited about small caps, that is the time when I actually feel I should cut exposure in small cap funds and stocks. When I see people feeling that it's very easy to make money in equities, that's a good time actually to reduce their equity allocation and go for debt. When people are very risk averse towards corporate bonds, that is actually a good time to invest in high quality corporate bonds. So it helps to be a little contrarian when you decide on your asset allocation, and the mood of the people around you and the behavior of people around you can be a very good indicator to actually make good asset allocation decisions. So I think this Mr. Koshi has already gone through in great detail what are the roles of different assets. So before you decide on going into any new asset, understand the asset's role in your portfolio, right? So with that, I will conclude my presentation. I hope it was useful to all of you. And I hand over to the events team for some compliance related slides that you will be seeing on the screen. So this tells you some of the basics of investing, like why to have your nomination in place, etc. in your investments. Actually, the most exciting part of investing is selecting securities and tracking the returns. But the housekeeping is equally important. For example, nominating having nominations in place for all your investments, finishing your KYC details from time to time, etc. Making sure you pick the right advisors. So I find often we ignore these things. Even I neglect them. I'm so obsessed with selecting the right investments that I don't pay attention to these, and it comes back to bite you at some time actually. I hope you're aware of SCORES, SEBI's complaints redressal system. Of course, fund houses have their own complaint systems also, but you don't find satisfactory answers, you can always go to SCORES. Finally, the mutual fund disclaimer that mutual funds are subject to market risks. Right, so we are done with these slides, I think. So over the next 15 minutes or so, I and Mr. Koshi can jointly take questions from some of you. So let me start with the first question that I saw. So Mr. Bhaskar Patnaik asked if we should increase our cash levels during times of volatility. So my answer would be that it is better to have an emergency fund in place at all times, which is invested in liquid securities. I don't think we should increase cash during volatility or reduce it, because that itself goes against the concept of asset allocation, because volatility is often also a good time to buy stocks. So at that time, if you go very cautious and you start to raise your cash allocation, it can be counterproductive. So what I would suggest is you estimate the worst case scenario for your emergency fund and have money in an emergency fund, which would be about 9 months worth of expenses or 12 months worth of expenses, depending on your job. What would you say, Mr. Koshi, to this?
Yeah, you're right. So having cash in hand is also a big risk, because as I told you, when you have the cash in hand, the actual money is not working in favor to you. I told you every money that you earn has to work in return to you to make that return. So when you hold cash, it's not going to give you any return. Rather, you can keep it in debt, a safer debt funds, rather than keeping in cash. In volatile times, that is what the asset allocation does.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there's a question from Shriya Mohan. Is there ever a period when all the assets go into the red? Yes, I have seen such a period in 2008 when the Lehman crisis hit. Actually, equity, bonds, gold, even liquid funds went into negative territory for a temporary period. Usually what I've seen is initially when the panic sets in, when a big event related risk manifests, all the assets can go down, because after all global investors are investing across asset classes. So when they get panicky and start to pull out money, everything tends to go down. The one thing that tends to hold up in times like this is US treasuries and the dollar. But as Indian investors, we don't have too many options to invest in US treasuries. For us, maybe bank FDs can be a safe haven. Bank FDs with the top banks, not of the lower rated banks, right? There's a question from Hitakshi Thakkar on why is the debt market in India not as vibrant as the equity market? You're quite right. I think the market is quite large and is quite well developed. But what happens is retail participation in the debt market is not as easy as equity market, because all along the debt market has been dominated mainly by government issuances and primary dealers, and the whole ecosystem for debt market is different. Retail investors do not have direct access to it, so I think people find it mystifying. What about you, Mr. Koshi? Do you think?
Yeah, I think as time goes by, you will see a lot of vibrancy even in debt markets. I am remembering the period from till 2007-8. I think it was a lower interest. It is from 17, 18, 13, 14, 12, 11, 8, 9. So it is recently in the last 10 years where the Indian debt markets have become slightly more vibrant. I think with the time changing, I think you will see a lot of things happening even in the debt market.
Right. So there's a question from Mr. Muruganandan on good question saying there are 20K plus funds in India, but only 4,000 stocks. So isn't it easier to actually select stocks than funds? so, so the thing, my reply would be that actually in the case of stocks, the chances of going wrong are far more, because I know fund managers say that of the fourth, in fact, 6,000 stocks are listed on the market. Of the 6,000 stocks, if you apply even basic business filters and financial filters like being profitable companies, decent return on equity, decent return on capital, only 250, 300 stocks will actually make the cut. So the universe is really not 4,000 stocks or 6,000 stocks. Now, if by chance, if you invest in some of the very poor quality stocks, you can easily lose 80, 90% of your money in a very short time. In a fund, it is very unlikely you will lose that kind of money. The fund may underperform the market. I've seen that happen, but you are very unlikely to lose a large proportion of your capital even if you choose the wrong fund. So that is my reply. So, Mr. Koshi, what do you feel?
You're right on the point, ma'am. I think you have added what was required to the answer to that particular question. So thank you.
Right. So how much should we allocate in each asset class in a situation like this? Vikas Gupta is asking. So as I told you, I'm unable to give a blanket answer because this will depend on your risk profile, your liabilities, your age, and so on. But today, given the market valuations, which I think Nifty P is 30 plus, etc., I would be a little cautious on equities. So I've seen even people who are usually aggressive, they are having equity exposures of 50-60% today, and they do invest in high quality debt instruments, because there is a lot of uncertainty for lenders in the next few months. It is better to be cautious with your choice of FDs and your bond funds and all. So today I would say the good assets actually would be, if you want equity, 50-60% allocation and a bit of play it very safe with your debt investments. But of course, this is a very personal thing. It has to vary based on the investor.
So that is also my view. I think we need to, based on the risk-taking capacity changes, I think it's always best to get an advice on what should be your appetite in terms of equity and take a call on that. Yeah.
Right. I think today, if I'm right, even dynamic asset allocation funds have only 40-50% allocation to equity.
You're right. So the dynamic asset allocation category funds that we have, which takes into consideration all the four parameters that you discussed, which is the market cap to GDP, the PE ratio, the price to book value, is currently at around 60-65%, which went as high as around 80% in March of 2020. Because that's when the markets came down, and right, we have approximately around 65-70% in the current scenario.
Okay. So Ram is asking if company PPF and NPS are both considered as debt. The answer is no. PPF is definitely a debt instrument. PPF is nothing but a proxy for government borrowing from you, the retail investor. But NPS is a market-linked vehicle. It is for your retirement. Returns on NPS totally depend on how the bond and the equity markets perform. And in the NPS, you have option even to invest 75% in equity. So it's not a debt instrument at all. It is a market-linked instrument. In the NPS, it is up to you whether you treat it as an equity investment or a debt, because allocation is in your hands, right? So would you take this question, Mr. Koshi? So he's Mr. Ramkrishna is asking, which is better? Is it recurring deposits or SIPs for asset allocation?
I see. It's all based on your risk-taking capacity. If your, if your horizon is a shorter, which is in a 1 year, I would advise a recurring deposit is better because the risk of equity or SIP would be higher on a 1 year basis. But if your financial goal is there for a larger year, I would say at least a 5-year period or a longer year period, you should always go with an SIP.
Right.
There are opportunities of even doing SIPs in debt. That's what I told you in between, even recurring deposit, your return percentage would be around 5.5 in the current scenario. You can always choose a debt mutual fund, which gives you a slightly better option of getting a slightly better return than the FD. So I think even in mutual funds also, you can do a debt SIP, which is for a period of around 2 years. If your financial goal is for 3 years, you can always choose an SIP in debt. But anything above 3-5 years is ideally advisable for SIP. Longer is better is my only advice.
Right. SIPs need not be restricted to equity funds. That is the key point you need to understand there.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. So Karthik Shri is asking, he's specifically addressing it to me. So he says, do value investors have to worry about market PE if our portfolios, if our stocks are lower PE? It depends on what your portfolio PE is. If it is really full of value stocks trading at very low, big discount to the market, it is more important to track the earnings of your companies than of the market. But the problem is when the market tanks, it is not as if low PE stocks don't fall, they also fall. And I have seen in the market falls of 2008 and before also that initially when panic sets in, there is no, there is no difference between Gadha and Godha. Everything will fall. Okay. and, and no investors who are selling in a panic don't look at niceties like PE, etc. So everything can fall. But yes, a low PE can offer better downside protection because these stocks, if they are truly value stocks, if their assets are good, if their business is good and the growth is good, they can rebound faster. The stocks that get derated permanently, you can lose a lot of money in that. So the risk of derating is lower with lower PE stocks. That is all I'll say. But if a crash comes, you can't think that low PE stocks won't fall. They could very well fall also. But yes, if it is your portfolio PE is substantially lower than the market, you can be a little more comfortable that the downside will be cushioned at some point in time, provided you own good quality stocks. So Muruganandan again is asking, should we invest in index funds during volatile markets? Mr. Koshi, would you like to take this?
Yeah. See, index funds have a lot of options, which is currently there. You will have, Sensex index fund. You will have Nifty index fund. Index fund primarily does not ensure that at volatile markets you have your saver. Okay. Your question is that at index funds are basically a passively managed fund, which is not an actively managed fund. Does not mean that a passively managed fund will do better in a volatile market. In the current scenario, I think there's a lot of opportunities which are still there in India. A passively managed fund, there is a lot of alpha which a fund manager is generating in an actively managed fund. So I think India being a developing country, I believe personally that, an actively managed fund still have scope of generating a better return than a passively managed fund like an index.
So we have time for just a couple of questions, I guess. So Rajesh Ram is asking, is it a good idea to do a SIP in a gold fund, which is basically FOF in gold ETF as a hedge? So my view on this is that, yes, if you have a fixed allocation to gold in your portfolio, say 5 or 10%, it is good because it can sort of cushion your fall. But you should not be starting SIPs after gold has run up 50-60% because SIPs are meant to be done through volatile market conditions, and SIPs also work best when some asset is falling sharply, right? Because then you average at a lower price, you are able to average your cost of purchase, right? So this SIP also should be started irrespective of market conditions. It should not be started because something is going up, okay? So with that caveat, I would say you can decide on a fixed allocation to gold in your portfolio based on your risk profile, and you should stick to that allocation whatever gold does. Whether it falls or rises, it should not affect your allocation or size of your SIP. And SIP in gold cannot be a very large proportion of your portfolio because typically gold spends many years sideways. It won't do anything and people will get frustrated with it. It won't create wealth. Only when some big risk materializes in the market, it will start performing, right? So that is why typically financial planners advise 5 to 10% allocation to gold and not anything more. Anything to add, Mr. Koshi?
No, point on, back on.
Yeah, okay. So as a long-term investor, how long should you be invested in a good stock to earn better returns? Now, from what I've seen, overall data on the markets, typically a 7 to 10 year holding period is necessary to earn decent returns from the market itself. Individual stocks, it is very hard to generalize. Now, you may be very lucky, you may pick a stock just before the market took a fancy to it and it may run up 3, 4. In the last 6 months, many investors are surprised by how good they are at small cap stock picking. So it is easy to confuse a bull market with a genius, they say, no? So last 6 months, people who pick small cap stocks, they've been very surprised by the way returns have come. But I've also lived through many periods in the stock market where you pick excellent stocks and then for 7-8 years there are no returns, and it really takes out your patience. So you should be prepared for that long period. If you are so good at stock picking that you can see when the business will take off and when the earnings will take off, how long the runway is, then you will be able to actually predict it, because then you know that the stock will get re-rated at some point in time. But for most investors, it is very hard to say when the call will pay off. I'm sure even fund managers struggle with this.
Very true. Very true. Very true. Very true point.
Yeah. So a last question. So is there a SIP in a dynamic allocation fund? Would you like to take this, Mr.
Yeah.
Koshi?
So I think the dynamic asset allocation category funds, definitely you can do a SIP because as I showed you the presentation, the journey of your investment becomes more smoother, and you don't have much of fluctuations which happens in terms of return when there is a bad equity market, because the debt takes the load. So the journey of an SIP in a dynamic asset allocation category is also good. In fact, you will have a smoother journey when compared to an equity fund. End of the day, I think it also ensures to capture the upside in the market, because it also increases the equity exposure when the market valuations are down, and when the market valuations is above, it reduces the equity. So I think it does the job. End of the day, the reason why it does it, because the objective of the fund is to generate a better return. So you can definitely do an SIP in the dynamic asset allocation funds also.
Okay, with that, I think we will wrap up this session. We have gone on for more than an hour. I'm sure you all want to go and enjoy your IPL matches and Saturday evenings. So thank you so much for such good questions. In fact, I've got a lot of ideas for writing also from your questions. And I'm sure Mr. Koshi also has come to know what investors are thinking at this particular point in time. So thank you so much, all of you, for participating. I hope it was a fruitful session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koshi, for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you, Atima. Thanks for your time.